roundtable. I apologize a little bit for the way my slides are going to look. I was putting it together this afternoon and trying to figure out how to get pictures from my phone into a PowerPoint. There's an admit on there. And then I lost the slide and had to put it together again a couple of minutes ago. So I'm hoping that all this is going to fall together. Okay, here we go. Around 1 a.m. on April 27th, 1865, the steamboat Sultana pulled away from the coaling station near Memphis. The Mississippi River was in its spring flood from melting snow. Between 1 and 2 hours later, into the voyage destined for Cairo, a tremendous boiler explosion severely damaged the Sultana, disabling her and starting a fire. This is the greatest maritime disaster in United States history. We will explore the cargo being transported, explain what might have happened, look at a side event a little bit, and a little bit about the aftermath of the thing. Steamboat building was born when in 1807, Robert Fulton united a boat with a steam engine. By the way, the difference between a steamboat and a steamship is that the steamboat has a flat bottom for river navigation. Fulton's system had its doubters, as many of us learned in elementary school in our history classes. It was called Fulton's Folly. I remember that well. As with any new technology, there are generations of growing pains. Many improvements have to cycle through as technology matures. Eventually, the use of steam will reach its zenith. Originally, the steam would go through a piston with machinery turning the shaft to turn a water wheel. The zenith would be the use of superheated steam passing through turbines turning propeller shafts. By around 1819, 1920, there were numerous steamboats plying the inland waters of the country. An expedition was sent up the Missouri River to determine the viability of using steamboats to supply forts all the way up to the Yellowstone River. The expedition had two steamboats and several keelboats like those used by Lewis and Clark. The keelboat was dependent on muscle or wind power for propulsion. The steam-powered craft could go faster but had problems navigating the snag-infested river. Steam also had frequent breakdowns requiring stops for repairs. In the end, the result was like a tie between the two styles of power. Steam's advantage was requiring fewer men to move more cargo. One interesting fact I saw somewhere was that over time, there was an average of one steamboat sinking per mile of Missouri River. A splendid example is the Arabia, dug up out of a field in Kansas. Parts of that boat and its cargo are in a museum in Kansas City. Our Sultana was the fifth to bear that name up until 1863. She was launched near Cincinnati in January 1863 at a cost of $60,000. The intent was to carry passengers and cargo on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. The Mississippi was fully open to New Orleans in mid 1863. She was of wooden construction, 260 feet long, with a 42-foot beam and a 7-foot deep hold. The twin paddle wheels were 34 feet in diameter with 11-foot long buckets or paddles. That makes the total width of this thing at about 70 feet. Rated to carry 1,000 tons of cargo and draw only 5 feet of water when fully loaded. The Sultana had 4 huge boilers, 18 feet long by 46 inches in diameter, with 24 5-inch return flues in each. In other words, the heat from the fires was going to go through these tubes through the boilers. Each boiler, the boiler iron was 17/48 inch thick. That's about 1/3 of an inch. And the tubes were about 1/8 of an inch thick. A rough estimate allowing for some free space is a capacity of about 900 gallons in each boiler. The engine cylinders were 25 inches in diameter with an 8-foot stroke. The water supply for the boilers was from the river. The Mississippi, we know, is loaded with silt, mud. As water is boiled to produce steam, the silt precipitates as sludge. It has to be removed every 5 days of operation. To do so involves a complete shutdown, kill the fires, remove the coals, let it cool down, drain the water, open a hatch on top, send somebody in to remove the accumulation. Some of the material may have hardened, requiring serious labor to remove. Once all 4 are clean, water is pumped in and the fires are restarted. They had safety valves on them, set it at 145 pounds. For the times, Sultana was the top of the line with 38 staterooms for 2 people each, allowing for 76 passengers. The furnishings were of the best quality. Ornate gas chandeliers provided light. The big salon even had a piano in it. In March 1864, the Sultana was sold to a new group of owners for $85,000. That's not too bad a return on the original cost of $60,000. I wish I had that kind of payback. James Cass Mason. Well, this is not good.
Slides on your things for me.
I should be doing that.
Okay.
Technical problem. Uh, no, that's all right. We'll have to do without slides. I'm sorry. James Cass Mason had a 3/8 share and will be the captain. Mason was born in Lynchburg, Virginia around 1831. He grew up in Missouri near the river. His early steamboating was mostly on the Missouri River. He married the daughter of a steamboat owner and became the captain of her boat. Now you can take that 2 ways. In mid-June of 1862, he traveled down the Mississippi from St. Louis on a regular basis. In February of 1863, the boat was stopped near island number 10 for inspection. Quinine, guns, and clothing bound for the Confederacy was found. The boat was seized and officers arrested. Captain Mason seems to have a will to take risks if it'll net him a profit. That boat and several others suffering the same fate were used to run military supplies to Memphis using government crews. By the end of March, Mason is captain of another boat, and once the Mississippi is open, makes runs from St. Louis to New Orleans. He is known to push his bar hard and do some racing on the river. After the Sultana purchase, he hauled U.S. government supplies and personnel to New Orleans and points in between. There has been a large boom in steamboat building, and it is getting difficult to get a full load of cargo. In addition to a loss of revenue from light loads, the Sultana is severely damaged several times in 1864, resulting in time lost and expensive repairs. Over the winter of 1864-5, the Sultana is idle due to ice in the Mississippi River. When the river opens again, Mason pushes the Sultana hard, attempting to haul as much freight as he can. The strain on the boilers is starting to show, and the repair stops are becoming frequent. Mason begins to have financial hardships and sells 1/3 of his 3/8 share. In other words, he now has a quarter share left. Shortly, he sells half of his remaining quarter share, and before long, he splits that and is left with a 1/16 share. The Sultana left St. Louis on March the 26th, arriving in New Orleans on April 1. A few days later, they head back upriver. The spring flood has begun. By pushing hard and being able to cut across some of the bends because of the high water, the Sultana reaches St. Louis on April 8th with a transit time of 4 days and 7 hours, a record for the season that earns the Sultana the coveted elk antlers to display. During the spring of 1865, an agreement is reached between the Union and Confederacy to begin exchanging prisoners. A camp was established just to the east of Vicksburg to hold the released prisoners from the prisons in Georgia and Alabama. That would be like Andersonville and in Alabama, I think it's something like Cahaba or in that order. They were still prisoners when transported to Vicksburg until officially exchanged, but being sheltered and fed by the Union during that time. Between April 4 and April 21, 3,792 names had been forwarded to St. Louis by assistant at Vicksburg. His name was Captain Frederick Speed. Mason is trying to get a cargo in St. Louis when inspectors of hulls and steam boilers for the District of St. Louis arrive on board on April 13th to do their thing. They are satisfied, maybe some cash changed hands. And Sultana is ready to sail on April 13th. Just before she departs, Steward Henry Lyda resigns, saying he has no confidence in the boilers because of numerous repairs made recently. First stop is Cairo. Arriving at 1 a.m. on April 14, Mason learns that some cargo is available, and he put out word that he will be leaving at 10 a.m. on the 15th. When news of Lincoln's death reached Cairo by telegraph, both newspapers put out special editions. Mason gathered up a stack of newspapers and moved his departure up to 5 a.m. He knew that the telegraph lines to the south were unreliable, so by being able to be the first to bring the news south, the Sultana would be remembered. Yes, indeed, she will be remembered. As they passed by towns, they would shout the news ashore. They arrive at Memphis early on the 16th and leave some newspapers. They arrive at Helena around noon on the 17th. Near sunset on the same day, they dock at Vicksburg. Captain Reuben Hatch Captain Reuben Hatch comes aboard to see Mason. Hatch informs Mason that there would be a quantity of government freight and released prisoners to be sent south. They may have made some kind of deal that would benefit both. Mason left Vicksburg around 8 a.m. on the 17th. At 10 p.m. on the 18th, they reached Baton Rouge and New Orleans about mid-morning on the 19th. The Sultana is the first to bring Lincoln news to that city. While in New Orleans, the boilers are clean and departure is planned at 5 p.m. the next day, the 20th. Mason has a hard time getting cargo and passengers and delays departure until 10 a.m. on the 21st. I can't get anything there. Several interesting passengers boarded at New Orleans. Some we'll hear about later. The family of Samuel Spikes with his wife, 6 children, and a niece booked passage. They were moving to the north. They carried $17,000 in gold, which were put into the boat's safe. There was also another $15,000 in cash from a commercial merchant being sent upriver in the safe also. The entire Spike's family would perish except for 17-year-old DeWitt. He searched for the others, but only found his mother and younger sister to bury. The safe and its contents would go down with the boat. By departure time, Sultana had a crew of 85 men and women, 40 paying passengers, 225 hogsheads of sugar, weighing about 1,200 pounds each, making about 135 tons. Also, 97 boxes of wine, weighing about 50 pounds each, making about 2.5 tons. There are 60 fat hogs weighing, in my estimation, about 5 tons total. A shipment of 40 to 50 worn out horses and mules, totaling about 30 tons, I guess. The total cargo, not including passengers, would be around 220 tons, well below rated capacity. Sultana also carries a mascot, a 7.5-foot alligator in a crate, of course. About 100 miles below Vicksburg, Sultana has to slow down because of a boiler leak. Near 8:45 a.m. on April the 23rd, the Sultana limped into Vicksburg. The crew drained the boilers and sought a boiler mechanic. Captain Mason went in search of Captain Hatch, and hopefully 1,000 ex-prisoners of war. Before the war, Hatch was a prominent merchant in Pittsfield and Quincy, Illinois. Many steamboat captains were among his acquaintances. Lincoln even knew him. When he enlisted with the 8th Illinois Infantry, he was made a regimental quartermaster using his connections, including Lincoln. Hatch was made captain and assistant quartermaster for the Union Army gathering at Cairo. Hatch and his civilian assistants began schemes to profit themselves at government expense, like buying stuff at low prices and selling it to the government at higher prices. Grant discovered the schemes and arrested Hatch and his cohorts. Hatch used his connections at Springfield and Washington, including the president, for help. A commission decided there were accounting errors, but very little fraud. Hatch is reinstated and sent to Helena to be chief quartermaster for the District of Eastern Arkansas. In August 1863, Hatch resigns from the service to take care of some things at home. A fire destroys his profitable store. He decides that a captain's pay plus whatever he can pick up on the side through doing whatever would maintain his lifestyle. With the help of friends in high places, on March the 12th, 1864, he is the chief quartermaster of the 13th Army Corps. Hatch was called before an examining board, which found him totally unfit to be a quartermaster and recommended removal from the service. As this is slowly moving through channels, Hatch is assigned as assistant quartermaster of volunteers at Vicksburg in February 11th, 1865. A Captain George Williams is a West Point graduate. In June 1863, he is appointed provost marshal of the military prison in Memphis. He begins taking bribes to speed the release of political prisoners. Stanton wants to remove him, but somehow he managed to become commissary of musters at Vicksburg on October 24th, 1863. Captain Frederick Speed, we mentioned him earlier, is adjutant for the 1st Division, 19th Army Corps in late 1862. In January 1864, he's promoted to Assistant Adjutant General of the entire 19th Army Corps. In August, he is Assistant Adjutant General of Volunteers for New Orleans. His superiors have given him high praise for his competence. On February 28, 1865, he goes to Vicksburg as an Assistant Adjutant General. William Kearns entered the Army as a private, eventually promoted to captain on February 29, 1864, as Assistant Quartermaster of Transportation in St. Louis. In February 1865, he is an assistant to Captain Hatch in Vicksburg. Kearns' duties are to arrange transportation for troops and supplies on the Mississippi River. These 4 officers, 2 of whom are scoundrels, were in charge of creating muster rolls, organizing the ex-prisoners, transporting by rail from camp to the waterfront, and loading on the steamboats. They and their subordinates managed to get 1,966 officers and men onto the Sultana. The anticipated revenue would have been about $5,600 when the cargo of men were delivered in Cairo. This mass of men with their rations would add at most 13 tons to the load. So the Sultana is now carrying 230 to 235 out of a rated 1,000 ton. It is not overloaded, but it is overcrowded. The main deck and the Hurricane, which is the top deck, are so full of men that when they lay down to sleep, there is almost no room left. The Hurricane deck has so many on it that it begins to sag on the cabin deck. Captain Mason has timbers installed to prop it up. While the Sultana is being loaded with men, the boiler repair is completed. A 1/4-inch plate of iron is installed over the leaking plate, which is about 1/3 inch thick. The running pressure for 1/4-inch plate is around 100 pounds instead of the 145 pounds for the thicker material. The installer says his workmanship is fine, but he does not trust the Sultana's boilers. The Sultana left Vicksburg around 1 a.m. on April 25. When daylight comes, rations are distributed, which is the usual fare of a hardtack biscuit with a chunk of salt pork per man. No coffee is provided to soak the hardtack in. There is no fire to cook the pork. They have to eat it raw. They're used to that. Some did manage to use the furnaces, but there are too many for all to have a turn at the heat. While going upstream, the Sultana would meet downstream traffic. The mass of men would surge to the side of the boat for a view of the other boat. In doing so, the Sultana would lean to the point of almost shipping water. The opposite side paddle wheel would be out of the water. This would cause a problem with steering. Captain Mason is worried that another problem, and he pleads with the men not to rock the boat. He knows that the 4 boilers share the same water supply. If the boat leans, water will run to the lower boilers, leaving the higher ones low on water. If the low water uncovers the flue tubes, they can become red hot. When the boat levels, the water hitting the hot tubes would flash to instant steam. increasing the pressure with the possibility of explosion. He is very concerned when the Sultana docks at Helena, and the curious men want to have a look at the flooded town and its people. A photographer shows up and adds to the problem, for all they want is to mug for the camera. It is a photo that will live in history. I'm sorry, I don't have it. I can't get it out. Let me try again. Something. I got slideshow going. This slide is of Captain Mason of the Sultana. Youngish looking fellow, fairly handsome, I guess. This is a picture taken in 1864 in St. Louis. You can see the word Sultana on the side of the paddle wheel housing. There's, for those you unfamiliar with steamboats, the main deck is in line with the word Sultana on the paddle wheel. The deck right above it is the cabin deck. And on top of the cabin deck that's open, you see at the stern of the boat what's called the hurricane deck. Just in front of the hurricane deck is another housing. It's called the Texas deck. This is where some of the crew and officers berthed. And right above the Texas deck, you see the pilot house. Okay, I think I'm back in tune here. Okay. Oh, no, I am. Oh, okay, I got to back up here. I did this. I got it. This is Captain Hatch. This is Captain Speed. This is the Sultana at Helena. Those two pictures of the Sultana, only two known pictures of the boat. You can see the men crowded on the top deck, the hurricane deck. You can see the men crowded around the main deck, and also you see a little black dot about halfway in between the two smokestacks. That's where the elk antlers are hung to display for everybody to see that this ship, this boat, earned the elk antlers for this year. Right. Moving back to the text, the Sultana docked at Memphis near 7 p.m. on April 26th. There was the cargo from New Orleans to be unloaded. The 225 hogsheads of sugar, the 97 boxes of wine, and the 60 fat hogs. A total of about 140 tons from the hold and 3 tons from the main deck is to be removed. What this will do is move the center of gravity higher, making the boat top heavy. They did not put anything more into the hold of the ship, so the center of gravity goes up. The tendency to lean would be more exaggerated by doing this. is going to take some time to unload, so some of the ex-prisoners go into town seeking food, entertainment, or whatever. Others help the crew unload for pay of 75 cents an hour. That's, for me, a very high wage, because I can remember back in the 1950s when I thought 50 cents an hour was a fantastic wage. Also, a promise of food and sipping liquor from the cabin passengers mess was also offered for help. Then loading is finished a little before 11, and the boat's bell is rung as a warning the Sultana would be leaving soon. Some miss the boat. A few managed to find their way to the coal dock as refueling was necessary. Uh, I've seen one account that said maybe 200 were missed getting on the boat. I hadn't seen anything definite on that. The coal loading was finished about 1 a.m. The Sultana is underway, and those not on duty are turning to sleep. When about 7 miles above Memphis, the pilot turns left to cross over to the Arkansas side where there is less current. The fast floodwaters hit the Sultana squarely on the right side, causing that side to rise and the left side to fall. Shortly after she returns to level is when the explosion occurs. What caused the explosion? There are three theories. The first is that while tilted, water would slide to the low side of the boiler network. It would expose some flue tubes, allowing them to get red hot. This is what concerned Captain Mason at Helena. When the boat leveled out, the returning water would instantly turn to steam, increasing pressure, resulting in a rupture of the metal. The second is that a rapidly expanding crack in the boiler causes a decrease in pressure, making the water boil. Turn to steam instantly, causing the explosion. The third is that some Confederate agent got an explosive device into the coal, causing the explosion in a firebox. This idea has been highly discounted. I like the second one, as the metal used in the boilers had undergone many cycles of heating and cooling and weakened its composition enough to cause failure. Remember, Captain Mason is a pedal to the metal kind of person, with his record-setting run in 1864 and the rush to spread Lincoln news downriver before the return back to pick up the XPOWs. In 1866, this design of boiler was discontinued. A little bit of physics here. In a controlled environment, the vapor from evaporating water can do work as it releases energy when it cools back to the liquid state. When under pressure, the phase change temperature rises. When the pressure is released, a rapid phase change takes place until the water reaches its phase change point. The resulting vapor wants to occupy more space than the liquid. The rapid expansion of the vapor is the explosion. I don't know how this came about, but somewhere coming out of the back of my mind, some of the energy that water needs to absorb to change state from liquid at 0 degrees centigrade to water at 0 degrees centigrade, it takes 80 calories of heat energy to do that per gram of water. Moving up in temperature, for each rise of a degree Celsius, it takes 1 calorie per gram of water to do that. For the phase change from liquid to vapor or gas, it requires 540 calories of energy to accomplish that. So you can see a lot of energy is put into it, and a lot of it will come out when it starts to boil at a rapid rate. Okay, on the Sultana, the blast moved upward and outward, destroying all in its path. The pilot house, several floors above the boilers, was blown over the side. The ability to steer was gone, and the Sultana became a floating mass on the flooded Mississippi River. As debris fell into the void where the blast occurred, the kindling ignited from the furnace embers and fire rapidly spread. Except for the machinery, river boats were all wood. They even used oil-based paints, adding to the conflagration. Many near the blast zone were killed by concussion or scalding. The patch that was put on the boiler remained intact as apparently the break occurred at the opposite end of the boiler. 3 of the 4 boilers were destroyed, all due to, in my opinion, iron weakened by stress. People began jumping into the water or were thrown in by the blast. They began grabbing at each other, causing many to drown. Those that lingered tried to be helpful by throwing floatable objects like doors, shutters, chunks of wood, hay bales, etc., into the water. Others looked for buckets kept on board to put out fires. Those had long disappeared to haul up drinking water from the river. Some of the buckets had even become chamber pots. The fire spread rapidly, aided by a strong wind. Survivors noted that Captain Mason was going about aiding people. He perished in the accident. Shortly after the explosion, the steamboat Sultana, coming downriver, arrived on the scene. She slowed, put out her boats, and began picking up survivors. After a while, her captain decided to get on to Memphis for more help. In those in the water she passed were disappointed by not being rescued. In Memphis, the alarm was raised. It would take a while for steamboats to get their water hot and steaming. They sent out their small boats and cutters, hauling the poor unfortunate to the shore. Townspeople gathered them up and took them to hospitals, soldiers' homes, and private homes to be treated. There is a lot of mention of scalded and naked, for so many would strip their clothing before they entered the water. Some were even rescued several miles past Memphis. By daylight, the steamboats in Memphis area had to steam up and set out to pick up survivors who had managed to climb on or cling to or were already picked up by citizens on both banks. Those on the Arkansas side tended to be of Southern persuasion. It seems that no matter Union or Confederate, man or woman, black or white, all pitched in to rescue and comfort the people. There are many stories elicited from the survivors and rescuers. There were even reunions of the survivors later on. One source said that there were 70 cabin passengers, 85 crew members, 1,953 ex-prisoners, and 22 guards of the 5th Ohio Infantry on the Sultana at the time of the explosion, for a total of 2,130. Among the survivors are 21 cabin passengers, 6 guards, 906 ex-prisoners, and 28 crew members, for a total of 961 survivors. I did the percentages of that, and among the survivors, 46%, best number, were the ex-prisoners. 33% were the crew, 27% were the guards, and 30% were from the cabin passengers. I think the guard number, the lowest number there, is probably due to the fact that they still had their full uniforms and being cool, they were in full uniform, and also the possibility that they might have tried to be more helpful uh, with helping people get off the boat. I'd like to kind of swing aside here a little bit and talk about just a few of the survivors as to uh, what they said went on. This first one is about Private Daniel Luganville and the alligator. Many who jumped into the water said that they had some fear that the 7.5 foot alligator might come after them. They didn't realize that in the cold water, the alligator would be sluggish. Uh, Private Luganville was of the 135th Ohio Infantry. He had other thoughts. He approached the animal with a bayonet, stabbing him several times, dumped him out of the crate, threw the crate overboard, and climbed in. He had to keep fighting off others who wanted to share his flotation device. He paddled all the way to Memphis. He became known as the man saved by an alligator. He did not completely kill the alligator, as others mentioned seeing it in coal bin. That might have got them a little more incentivized to jump overboard, seeing the alligator was still on board the boat. This is about the senator, Massachusetts born William Dunham Snow, boarded at Memphis. He was a U.S. Senator elect who had settled in the Pine Bluff area in 1860. I don't know how he got elected senator. He was instrumental in raising 3 Union regiments from Arkansas. He was awakened by the shaking of the explosion. He was a witness to some in the water trying to climb aboard the lifeboat, many of them drowning. Also, he saw men from the cabins putting life preservers on the wives and children before tossing them into the water. After rescue, he was in Cairo the next day. And there were several others that got passage to Cairo the day after the disaster. Snow testified before the Washburn Commission investigating the Sultana incident. He did not get a seat in Congress as Arkansas had not been readmitted to the Union. He went to Paris to study civil law. Returning to the U.S., he settled in Brooklyn, New York. In 1874, he invented 3 devices dealing with electricity. In 1875, he graduated from Columbia Law School and moved to Hackensack, New Jersey, and died at age 78. This is the drunk. Private John Henry King became an alcohol and traveled the country lecturing on temperance. He died of acute alcohol poisoning on May the 22nd, 1893, at age 62. This is about Washington McIntosh. Private Washington McIntosh, 14th Illinois Infantry, entered Andersonville weighing 175 pounds. Oh. That is John Henry King. 175 pounds into Andersonville. He left 6 months later in March 1865, weighing 65 pounds and almost naked. He departed Vicksburg on the Henry Ames, which was the first boat to take a load of the ex-prisoners north. He was left behind when the Ames left Memphis as he was in town adventuring. He saw the Sultana when she arrived and thought, what difference will one more make? The explosion catapulted him into the water, landing 40 to 50 feet from the boat. He grabbed a few pieces of debris. It did not take much to keep him afloat. He claimed the cold water was therapeutic, and these are his words. Being in the cold water so long had reduced the swelling in my ankles and feet. They looked like scalded beef. The scurvy ulcers were thoroughly cleaned by the prolonged bath in the sandy water, and I believe now that terrible bath had much to do with saving my feet from amputation. End quote. Although McIntosh eventually married and had children, he came home a mental and physical wreck. We call that today PTSD. By January 1868, he was unable to do physical work. He traveled around the country playing music and writing and selling songs and poetry. He died penniless on July 26, 1928, at the National Military Home in Leavenworth, Kansas. This is Levi Morgan, Private Levi Morgan, 21st Ohio Infantry. At the Vicksburg loading, noted that when about half were aboard, he overheard Captain Mason protesting the overcrowding. The officer in charge of the loading said that he was loading the boat and would put on as many as he wanted. After the explosion, Morgan searched for buckets to put out the fire. He even swam from the front to the rear to find buckets with no luck. He stays for a while to throw off dead men as he didn't want to see them incinerated. After rescue, the Sanitary Commission gave him a red shirt and drawers. Another gave him a pair of shoes, another a pair of trousers, and another a hat. He is well decked out for traveling home. This is about two people, Jenny Perry and Albert King. 35-year-old Jenny Perry boarded at New Orleans to return to Cincinnati. She had been visiting her husband, William, stationed on the Ram, Tennessee. When she heard the explosion, she donned a life preserver and jumped into the river. Along with several soldiers, she secured the door and was off downriver with the current. Corporal Albert King of the 100th Ohio Infantry was sleeping about 20 feet from the stern, probably on the main deck. He said, "Men, coal, wood, and timbers were thrown over and beyond us. The steam and ashes smothered us so that we could hardly breathe. After he jumped in, he found a lady beside him in distress. He acquired a stateroom door and valiantly went back for our girl Jenny. Eventually, they shared the door with several others. Jenny had a struggle with a man who wanted to relieve her of her vest, the life vest. That struggle lasted 3 rounds. Seeing another door nearby, she attempted to secure it, but was warned off by another soldier who claimed it as his own. She had to return to her original door. After floating into some small trees and brush, Albert and Jenny mounted a small log. Albert held her by one hand and a small tree with the other as they sat in water up to their shoulders. This would, of course, be on the Arkansas side. A former soldier of the 23rd Arkansas Cavalry lived in this area. He put on his rebel jacket, grabbed his dugout canoe, and began to harvest survivors from the flooded trees. Among those rescued were Jenny Perry and Albert King. They were wrapped in blankets and placed in front of a fire. When they had warmed up some, she removed a ring from her finger, offered it to Albert, saying that she had lost everything of value except that ring, and wanted him to have it as a token of reward. Eventually, Jenny found her way home to Ohio. I didn't see any more about Albert, but I thought it was kind of odd that they were both from Ohio. I don't have a picture of Jenny, but I visualize her as a very attractive, petite, well-educated lady. You can form your own image. Our last survivor we want to talk about, by no means the last survivor ever, at Vicksburg, 41-year-old Second Lieutenant Harvey Annis of the 51st USCT, his 48-year-old wife Ann and their 7-year-old daughter Isabella boarded the Sultana. I got a picture of her. Oh, that's guy in the story before. Albert King. This is Ann Annis. Okay, they're on the Sultana. In late 1864, Harvey had some serious medical issues, which rendered him unfit for field service. Ann and Isabella had come to Vicksburg to nurse him and take him back to Wisconsin. Ann noted the crowding, but the men were well behaved. When they were awakened by the explosion, they were unable to get out of the stateroom because of steam in the hallway. Harvey put life belts on himself and Ann. Isabella was too small to keep a life belt on. They exited through the steam to the rear of the stateroom. Ann followed Harvey and Isabella down a rope to the lower deck. She said as she was descending the rope, when a man from above jumped and knocked her into the hold. Husband and daughter had already overboarded. As she was trying to go over, a mule pinned her for a while. When she finally got off, her life vest was askew and she hung on to the rudder to straighten it. She never saw Harvey or Isabella again. Another survivor later told her that he had seen a man with a little girl floating on a door. He also told her that he saw them enter an eddy and never resurfaced. She finally had to let go of the rudder as fire approached. She found a board to help her in the water. She was rescued about 5 a.m. opposite Memphis and taken to Gayoso Hospital. On April 29th, a local newspaper put out an appeal about a lady needing aid with clothing, etc. The Memphis ladies were generous. Ann left for Wisconsin on May the 11th. I should mention that Ann and Jenny are the only two women survivors of this thing. Ann had a difficult time getting any funds from the government. Harvey had resigned before the disaster. In 1877, Congress granted her $235 for the time of Harvey's resignation on February 24th to April 27th, along with a small pension. In 1886, the pension was ceased by Congress. She eventually, persistently, got a widow's pension of $17 per month. A little more about Anne. She was born in England in 1816 and was a maid in waiting at Queen Victoria's coronation. She married an English sea captain in 1840, and the two were shipwrecked on an island 6 months after they were married. Anne survived. She married another sea captain 3 years later, and they had 3 children before he died at sea in 1849. She moved to Wisconsin with her parents, brother, and children. In 1850, she married Harvey Annis, a carpenter. They had 4 children. When she got back home, she learned that her 2 oldest sons had joined the Army. They survived the war. She rented out rooms while trying to get the government pension. 4 of her 7 children died before her. She passed at age 84 in 1900. She never remarried. That is one heck of a life. And I got to say, hey, you go, girl. All right. A little more. Why did so many ex-prisoners get loaded on the Sultana? There may be several reasons that all came together at the same time. There is Captain Mason, who needed cash. He fully knew that the recommended load was to be around 1,300. He may have looked away as the boat filled. There is Captain Hatch, who many believe has a deal with Mason for getting a good load. The more loaded is more for Hatch. Hatch tells his subordinates that the Sultana is to get a load, even though two other boats are available. An agent for one of the other boats offered a bribe to one of the assistant quartermasters, not one of these four, of 50 cents per head. There were incomplete muster rolls, so no one can be really sure how many they had on board. The alternate plan was to finish the muster rolls in transit, as Mason seemed eager to leave. These are there are ex-prisoners who are eager to get home. So when you have a bunch of men eager to go someplace, they line up and keep moving until, and in the army, moving until they're ordered to stop or the last one boards. Why wasn't there more written about the Sultana incident? Researcher and author Gene Saliker claimed that there was. He cited many articles published over many months and years about the accident and survivors. There was so much happening in April 1865 that some things do not get retained in memories as much as others. Like everyone knows where Lee surrendered. How about where Johnston surrendered? I think it might be Bentonville, North Carolina, but I'm not sure on that. There is probably a marker of some kind on the Memphis waterfront where the victims were brought in. But how can a spot be marked and maintained where the accident happened? In the late 19th century, the Mississippi Channel was not controlled as it is today. Every flood would make changes to the landscape, wiping out any marked spot. Battles were kept in memories by veterans who kept visiting the battlefields and telling their stories that got better with each telling. Eventually, the U.S. Department of Interior saw the light and made national battlefields. How many of the 961 Sultana survivors would want to visit the area of their suffering? The Sultana, there were efforts, I must say, that occurred over the years that congresspersons would introduce bills to fund a little memorial of some kind for the Sultana disaster. And it was always something, a depression, a war, or whatever the heck came along, and they could not get the funding completed to do that. But the Sultana was not forgotten. In 2015, the 140th anniversary year, a small museum was opened in Marion, Arkansas. They had good intentions to move to a bigger space in April of 2025, which would have been the 150th anniversary. The new space is there. I don't know whether they got it done for this year or not. But they may not have much resources. Their support is mostly donations. A little bit about some of the other aftermath. At 11:30 a.m. on April 27th, 1865, General Washburn, as commander of the West Tennessee Military District in Memphis, has a commission starting to interview survivors of the Sultana. Another commission comes from Washington. The most damning testimony comes from Captain Hatch, as he apparently gives false testimony that implies Captain Speed is responsible that everything that Hatch, did regarding the selection and loading of the Sultana. Captain Speed requests a board of inquiry to clear his name. General Grant denies the request. Instead, Speed is court-martialed. The trial has many delays. The major cause of the delays is because they wanted Hatch to come testify for the defense. Upon leaving Vicksburg, Hatch takes nearly $15,000 of quartermaster funds with the intention of leaving it with headquarters in St. Louis. He claimed that he did not want to leave it with the incoming quartermaster in Vicksburg. The money is put in the boat's safe, along with other money. The safe is robbed before getting to St. Louis. Only part of the $15,000 was taken, nor was any of the other money in the safe touched. Hatch is subjected to an inquiry in Chicago over the incident. Repeated requests are sent to Hatch for his presence at Speed's trial. He refuses to honor any of them. So Speed is convicted and becomes another victim of the Sultana. Eventually, I like this phrase, under further review, the War Department is convinced to reverse Speed's conviction, and he receives an honorable discharge on September 1st, 1866. There are still some who believed him guilty. In 1978, Arthur Gene Seliker and another researcher independently take a look at all the printed testimony regarding the Sultana incident and separately reach the same conclusion that Speed was not guilty. And Gene Saliker wrote a book. And this is the book that he wrote. To me, it's a very good book. If you get a chance to read it, give it a read. And that concludes what I have. If there are any questions, I'll try to give them a go. Just unmute yourself and ask a question. David, you always have a question. Unmute yourself.
Me? I couldn't remember how many
There we
David
go.
told me.
There we go.
I thought you were talking to Dave Post. We got several Davids, don't we? Now, the only thing I was going to say from watching the DVD just a couple of days ago, it went into a little more detail of the logistics of the ship turning. It's like the ship was going north, right from Memphis, and the wind was blowing north. So when everything exploded up front, the stern was fairly safe. So the guys who couldn't swim stayed on the back. But then because they lost the steering, because the pilot house was gone, the wind and current started twisting the boat till it turned around. And now the wind's blowing again, still from the south, but all these guys are trapped up back on the stern, and the flames were just blowing right toward them. And so then they either burned to death or jumped off with everyone else too eventually. But so these were the guys who were either too weak or didn't know how to were not swimmers. So a lot of them were perished that way.
Correction, David. The wind was out of the north. It was coming downriver.
Well, how would that have hurt the stern then when the boat turned around? The boat was going north, wasn't it?
Okay. The boat was going north,
Yeah.
right on fire. The paddle wheels were flared out to the side.
Yeah.
And one of them further than the other. And the current hooked one paddle wheel and started turning it.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And so the flames had been going towards the stern at the beginning, and now as it turns, and now going towards the bow of the boat.
So they were on the bow, not the stern. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. This DVD, I think, was over an hour and a half. That hour and a half, 2 hours. We stopped a couple times to go do different things, but hour and a half. And I'd recommend it for those who have access to the Columbia Library. We'll be turning it in the next day or two. We just held on to it to share it with you guys. Remember the Sultana, and I think it's a PBS or national, one of those. So they do pretty good stuff.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I held it up. I'm trying to see who made it, but it was good. I stayed awake during the whole thing. And so
Other questions or comments? Evan, you've been taking notes. Did you have a question?
No, not really. Thank you.
Hi, Harold. This is Dennis.
Yeah,
I'm not really being shy. The camera on my computer is not working,
that's all
but
right.
so nobody was ever held accountable for it, I guess, except Captain Speed, and then he was exonerated.
Right.
And everybody seems to think that Hatch was the one who's really to blame for the tragedy, and somehow political connections or whatever, he managed to escape any kind of justice.
Right. I don't know. The book didn't go into anything on the dealing in Chicago about the missing funds that he had taken to St. Louis. Um, whether he got a court martial or was tried for, I don't remember seeing anything about that. But the goings on, Hatch did say load the Sultana instead of these other boats that are here already, kind of thing. So it kind of shows that he knew that it was his to advantage to get as many people on the Sultana as he possibly could. Dennis, thanks for the question. Comment. Anything else? Well, guys, I'm wore out. So we'll dismiss class at this time and hope to see you again next month. Sharon is going to be doing a program dealing with Grant. So we look forward to that program in April. May, if somebody has something that they are dying to do, we would certainly entertain and offer. So otherwise, dismissed.
Thank you, Harold.
thank you,
Thank you,
Harold.
guys. Yes, Bill.
I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. How's Florida?
Well, we it's very dry here in Naples, Florida. One of the driest winters we've had in a long time, but the beach is just fine. The weather's nice, other than being really dry. We're looking forward to being back home in about 3 weeks.
All right. Looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, we're gonna take a little drive up through Virginia on the way home. I'm gonna go to Culpeper, Virginia, and I'm gonna kind of poke around Brandy Station, maybe, and some places like in there. So.
Okay. Evan, you can cut that.